This is Heal Your Mind, Heal Your Body with Dr. Schuyler. Discover how your thoughts manifest disease and what you can do about it. Here's your host, Dr. Schuyler.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back. So, are we normalizing disrespect in today's society? The things that kids tell me their parents say to them shocks me. And I try to have this poker face when I'm talking with kids and they repeat some of the things their parents say to them. And it's so prolific right now. I literally need to do a podcast on this. I do talk about a little bit of respect in the book, but this has become so mainstream, disrespecting each other and our children or our coworkers and people in the grocery store. I can't figure out when talking disrespectfully became such a normal thing. Like, why as humans do we speak this way to one another? So I when kids say to me, some of the things, I'm just going to quote them. Why are you so difficult? Why are you crying? Why are you bothering me? Get out of my face. These are some of the benign things that I can repeat that I hear. And this is how I'm going to phrase it. Those might have sound kind of normal to you. Why are you being so difficult? Why are you crying? Why are you bothering me? Get out of my face. Those are things that might not sound bad, but just give me a second. And I'm going to dive right into this. Do you want your child to marry someone who speaks to them the exact same way that you speak to them when you are angry? Now, allow me to explain this for a moment. There's a personal story. Long ago, I once had this ex-boyfriend, and I had long broken up with him for these reasons that will come out in a second. And in attempts to get me back, I don't know what was going on. He knocks on my door, and I usher him off the door, and then I speak on the phone with him later, and he begins to scream at me, and he begins to demand that I call myself I use an acronym, a POS. If you don't know what that is, Google it, because I'm not going to say it. And if I called myself a POS, he would admit that he partook in adult behaviors without my knowledge. So after laughing so hard, I literally about fell over. I'm like, what? And he's screaming this phrase, call yourself a POS, and I'll admit it, I blah, blah, blah. And I just stopped laughing, and I just said, perhaps someday you will witness your daughter being screamed at the exact same way that you're speaking to me. Because you are so comfortable speaking to me in this manner, you must be okay with your daughter being spoken to this way by her partner after he decides to partake in certain behaviors behind her back. This was simply intolerable to me. This was so out of my norm of what I expect my life to be. I was shocked that someone had mistaken me for someone who would tolerate being spoken to that way. Why was he so comfortable being so disrespectful? That would be found in his moral fabric based in his childhood beliefs that speaking to women were okay based on how he was raised. He felt it was normal and okay to speak to him in this way, and that it was okay if his daughter spoken to that way. But my childhood, my father was a military man, and even in anger, he had never once disrespected me. He had never once in my entire life, can I recall, he raised his voice at me, even in anger. He had treated me with respect and honor and dignity, and the handful of times he was angry at me, he didn't take it out on me. Y'all, I gotta tell you, I did some really dumb stuff as a kid that any parent, for any reason, could be furious at me. At 12, I hot-wired my brother's car, drove it, stole it, hit a palm tree, and my sister had to call the cops. I did some shady stuff as a kid. My dad was so disappointed in me and so enraged, but you know what he didn't do? He didn't shame me. I was grounded my entire 8th grade year, but it was so foreign to me to be spoken to in such a disrespectful way. All I could do was just laugh and just think, this man's poor children have been spoken to this way. So when this human was screaming at me, it was simply not in my hard wiring to tolerate it. It was in his hard wiring to treat people that way, to treat the people he loved that way, but it wasn't mine. My father would never in any this lifetime or next ever have spoken to my mother that way or any of his children, not even in anger. And this one time I recall, like any teenager back before there was alarms and video cameras everywhere, we snuck out back in the day. And I come creeping in, the sun's coming up, and I come creeping in at 4 a.m. and I open the back fence, and there was my dad, all like 6'1" of them, standing there. Heart sunk. The man didn't say a word. The power in his silence shook me to my soul to this day. He just said, "Go to bed. We'll discuss this later." I had disrespected his rules up, back, down, backwards, and sideways. And he still didn't yell at me. Now, again, I was grounded again, rightfully so. But even when I was disrespecting him, he didn't disrespect me back. And that encoded in me as an adult what I will tolerate as an adult. So what we learn in childhood is what we will be mirrored back as an adults. What we tolerate in childhood is what we will tolerate in our adults and our adult friends and our relationships, our partners, our coworkers. So for this human to be so comfortable speaking to women that way shows he learned it. It's okay for him to talk to women that way. But why was it not okay for me to receive it? I was taught that men don't disrespect women. This is when I beg to ask you this question. Now imagine, I'm going back to the same phrase I started with. You're watching your partner, your child's partner, speak to them. Let's say you have a daughter and you're watching this husband say to her, "Why are you crying? You're bothering me. Get out of my face. Why are you so difficult?" We say those things to our children, but are you okay with your children being spoken to that way? Are you okay if their partner speaks to them that way? When we're disrespectful, it becomes a norm in a household. In some households, talking disrespectful is a norm. It simply was not a norm in our household to talk that way, but many it is. And this is what I'm seeing every day at work. And it's kind of terrifying me because I know the neural programming that takes place. It develops these neural pathways. That's why this adult later in life, he had the neural pathway. It's okay to talk to people this way. I didn't have that pathway. I don't understand that language. So when a child is spoken to disrespectfully over time, they develop these beliefs. They are not worthy of respect. My father instilled in me, I'm worthy of respect. So I wouldn't accept mistreatment later in life. But a child who's belittled or criticized, "Get out of my face. I'll give you something to cry about. What are you crying for?" They're repeatedly being told they're not deserving of being spoken to kindly or respectfully. So as a result, they end up accepting mistreatment. And they also get the concept, this is how love works. Now, for him to scream and yell profanities at a woman, well, that's just how love looks for him. And as a child, he must have witnessed that. So if your child observes or experiences disrespectful communication in their household, they then begin to associate that's what love means. Love means to scream names at one another. Love means get out of my face. Love means to lie. Love means to betray. That's what they begin to think it is. They mistake verbal abuse or harsh criticism or disrespect as a form of love in their adult relationships. They begin to think it's okay to talk this way, and they begin to mirror the behavior. And this is when it gets so hard for me as a therapist to work with children whose parents talk to them so disrespectfully, because then the parent is mad when the child mirrors back to them what they're saying. And the child's brain is programmed to mirror back. Language imprints, words imprint. They have mental, emotional imprint. So these emotional anchors begin to anchor into the child's psyche. This disrespectful form of communication emotionally anchors into them. So certain words, certain tones become tied to negative states, which is then married to this is what love is. This is what connection is. So in future relationships, this child subconsciously seeks out to feel drawn to people who communicate in similar ways. And it's harmful. So these emotional anchors get repeated in future events. So I'm sure so many people out there are going, that's right. These emotional anchors are why I have this relationship, or I have this friendship, why I have this partner, why I had this person. These neural and emotional programming increases the likelihood that if a child is talked to disrespectfully, that they're going to have disrespectful forms of communications later in life. So we have these things called mirror neurons. They're specialized cells in the brain that fire when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing the same action. So these mirror neurons, they are responsible for social learning and empathy. When a parent speaks to a child in a stressful, frustrated, or disrespectful tone, the child mirror neurons will reflect that emotional state back. So when you snap at your child and they snap back, parents, they were imitating you. Your kid's not born disrespectful, but they learn it. They either stop talking and they shut up and say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, or I understand. One child I know just says, I understand over and over again. And inside she's screaming something totally different. So if your child just goes, I understand, doesn't talk, they've just learned not to rock the boat if you're talking disrespectful. But if they snap back, they're imitating you. And then we get so mad at them for snapping at us. Don't talk to me that way. They're just mirroring back how you just spoke to them. And this is when it's so hard as a therapist. And I always talk about these pink elephants. The parents wants to have a conference with me. My child talks so disrespectfully. And I've seen text messages and emails and voicemails. And I'm thinking to myself, please don't ever wonder why your child talks to you disrespectfully. That's what I would love to say to the parent. Obviously, I don't. But if your child's talking disrespectfully, I'm asking you to sit back and just check the ego for a little bit for the sake of your child's future relationships. Do you want your child being spoken to the way in which you may speak to them? Or do you want your child spoken to the way I was spoken to? Do you want them to tolerate it? So if you're anxious or angry or speak in this harsh, critical tone and the child mirrors that, they're simply picking up these emotional cues and triggers, and their anxiety gets heightened. So the child absorbs your emotional state and your anxiety and these negative emotional anchors and becomes more prone to anxiety. And this may sound like I'm describing your childhood. Oh my gosh, this is what happened to me when I was a child. Because odds are it is what happened to you as a child. It's so prevalent. That begs the question, when did talking disrespectfully become so normal? And how do we stop talking to each other disrespectfully? In the previous podcast, I just did the power of silence. The power of silence in between comments allows for a moment to respond rather than react. So when a child is spoken to, when anyone is spoken to disrespectfully, it heightens their nervous system. Their cortisol goes up. They get this chronic stress response. It does a dysregulation of something called the HPA, and that governs the body's stress response. It dysregulates the gut, digestive issues, stomach aches. It dysregulates the IBS, the immune system. So when you go to speak to someone, it's not just about you getting your point across. You can be angry, and you can still speak with respect to whomever you're angry with. Constant exposure to stress from disrespectful communication can make anyone's nervous system overactive and chronic anxiety. So this access between the gut and the brain is so sensitive to stress. So when we are spoken to in such a disrespectful manner, if I wasn't at a place in my life being talked to so disrespectfully, there's a point in my life that would have torn my stomach up. But being at a place when you can hold the space and recognize that someone's coming from such a harsh, disrespectful background doesn't mean I have to catch the vibe. I could just kind of laugh at the experience like, oh my gosh, is this person okay? But most people don't have that ability, and not understanding the power of words and the energy behind those words can last a lifetime. Think about what was said to you as a child that was disrespectful, that is stuck with you to this day. There's some thought, there's some memory, there's especially some energy behind a tone that is stuck with you. And someone's like, all I just said was take a seat. Well, I could say take a seat, take a seat, take a seat, take a seat. Even just by something as simple as that, take a seat. If you just change your tone, and when people gaslight you and say, I just said take a seat, But yeah, it was your tone. I didn't take any tone. Now you're gaslit. That's a form of disrespect when people hide behind this tone and energy that stays in our emotional memory and emotional anchors for a lifetime. Emotional energy anchors are powerful. Talking with disrespect lasts a lifetime. So these are not just neural carriers of information. They're packed with emotional energy and have profound impact on your development, your child's development. So when people speak to us disrespectfully or with frustration, they're communicating, they're transmitting energy, these emotions, and then how we absorb it. Do we absorb that energy or do we transmute it and get rid of it? I transmuted it and saw it as laughter. Most people would absorb such cruel, harsh talking too, especially as children. We're sponges when we are children. We absorb energy, and the energy and the tone behind words is just as important as the words themselves. Disrespectful communication conveys to a human, you are not worthy of respect. You are not safe. And these messages can deeply impact a sense of someone's self-worth or emotional security. So negative language creates a sense of unworthiness, low self-esteem, internalized anxiety, things like that we say to our kids. Again, and now imagine, we say this to our kids, but I want you to imagine their partner, their husband, their spouse, their wife saying this to them. So fast forward your child. They're 35 years old and they're married and they got little kids running around. And their partner saying to them, you're so difficult. Why can't you just listen? Why don't you behave? Do you want your child being spoken to that way? But yet we speak to our children that way. And we instill this sense of shame and guilt, leading our children to have these internalized feelings. And I bet people out there can relate to this that happened in their childhood. And they're sitting back going, wait, am I doing that to my child? And you may be. And this is the point of this, to start looking outside the box, is to ways that our children and our families and our loved ones are full of anxiety and gut issues and autoimmune issues, and how often we tolerate disrespectful language. And it is at an alarming rate per week that children are reporting back the disrespectful language their parents are saying, and I'm not okay with it. And it will never be excusable that you are stressed, you're overworked to ever disrespect someone. I think it's our job as humans to model respectful language even when we're upset. So instead of imagine your child's grown up and they're 35 and you got little grandkid babies kind of running around, and their partner says, why are you always so difficult? That's going to be upsetting to watch. But imagine their partner saying to them, hey, babe, I know you're having a tough time right now. Let's talk about it. What's going on? I'm listening. What's up? What's going on? How different it would be to witness your child as an adult being spoken to. I know you're having a tough time right now. What's going on? I see that you're crying. Can I help? Can we talk? So I want you to ask yourself, when you are mad, do you speak to people with respect? Or is your trauma lingering in you that when you are really stressed out and you're really angry and your child sneaks in at 4:00 in the morning, no matter how much they're disrespecting you, it is your job to model restraint and emotional regulation, emotional intelligence. I still have hellfire rain upon my children. I'll take phones away, but it doesn't include disrespecting them. And when my child speaks to me disrespectful, I can remember it happened, maybe it was right before school started. My kid was getting some supplies and she turned and snapped at me and said, I don't remember what it was, but it caught my attention. The other daughter's face went like white, like, oh my God, she just disrespected mom. And I just sat there and I said, I'm going to give you a mulligan on that one. And mulligan means I'm going to give you a do-over in golf. I'm going to give you a do-over. I'm going to give you 3 seconds to rephrase that to me. And she did, and I held the space. I held the space and I gave her a chance to rephrase it in a respectful manner. And I said to her, not even in anger may you talk to me disrespectfully. I do not speak to you that way and I will not tolerate being spoken to that way. I could have gone off on her, but I used the power of silence to give her a chance to rephrase that, to learn. My job is to model to my child, even in anger and frustration and hurried, whatever it is, how to speak to someone when you are stressed with respect. So I'm urging you all, when you speak to your child, I want you to stop and take a moment. Are you okay if their partner speaks to them that way later in life? Are you okay with your daughter hearing things like, call yourself a blah, 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 blah? Are you okay hearing those things? Are you okay with your son saying that to a daughter someday? So when you get mad at your kid, and stop and listen to yourself. Are you saying, you're such a bother? Why are you so difficult? Why are you crying? You're doing this to me again. I can't believe you're doing this to me again. Is that how you want their partner speaking to them? So kids are going to disrespect you. They're going to tick you off. They're going to do the wrong thing, and they're going to make epic mistakes. The amount of mistakes that I made, and thank the love of God, the grace of God, my dad was exceptionally, exceptionally patient with all the mistakes that I made. And it taught me honor, and it taught me respect, and it taught me how to be treated as an adult. So when you're in anger and when you're in frustration, even if your child is breaking your house rules, it's your job to model what respectful anger looks like, and that you will notice a big reduction in your child's anxiety if you start talking to them respectfully. You will notice a significant reduction in anxiety when you start talking respectfully to people that you love when you are in a moment of anger. And all this is talked about again in the book, and it's out now. And what I've noticed that it's not just a book for parents, it's a book for anybody who has anxiety, gut, or autoimmune issues. It's also empowering your inner child to heal. Not really the title of the book, but it's taken on a whole separate life of its own. You can see through your childhood how your parents spoke to you, their attachment styles, their secondary gains, the stress contagion, the disrespectful manner, the tone, automatic negative thoughts. This book walks you through the lifetime from, birth all the way up to now, why anxiety and autoimmune are at epidemic levels, why gut issues are so prevalent. And for parents, it gives you a chance to understand the secret language that teens use. Adolescents and teenagers have a whole different language that we'll never understand. And things like, back in my generation, don't work. So anyways, this book covers all these really, really out-of-the-box concepts that are evidence science-based, merging science and psychology to really start empowering you to either heal your inner child or to help empower your child to heal. You can find it at Amazon, pretty much anywhere at this point in time. And if you go to the website and you want to get a free chapter of the book, it's at drschuyler.net, and it's a whole free chapter just to get you a sneak peek what the book looks like. And also the second book, Rewiring Your Heart, How to Mend Emotional Heart Trauma, learning about the forgotten third brain, the heart. I'm sending abundant, happy, healthy vibes your way. Abundant blessings, everybody. Thank you for your time. I feel so grateful you have listened to the end. When we begin to understand how our body manifests stress, trauma, depression, anxiety, and even unexpressed emotions, we then create a space, a bandwidth in our minds to begin to heal our bodies. Healing is a decision, and I am grateful for yours. Abundant blessings, Dr. Schuyler.
To learn more about the work Dr. Schuyler is doing, please visit drschuyler.net. That's drschuyler.net. And remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you like to listen.
Produced by Audivita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.